Welcome back to Conversations That Awaken by Joe Bandra. If you've been with us since episode 1, thank you for taking this journey with us. Over the first 10 episodes, we've questioned many of the assumptions most of us inherited without ever examining them. We've explored the nature of reality, the illusion of separation, the origins of belief, the question of God, the self-organizing universe, the fact of being, the limits of language, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. You may have noticed that we've returned to some of the same ideas more than once. That wasn't by accident. Some truths cannot be understood by hearing them only once. They must be approached from different angles, examined through different lenses, and reflected upon until they become your own direct insight. Repetition is not about convincing you, it is about inviting you to observe more deeply. Our purpose has never been to give you another belief system. It has always been to encourage you to examine, question, investigate, and ultimately understand for yourself. Because borrowed knowledge is information. Direct experience, on the other hand, is transformation. If you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to begin with episode 1. Each conversation builds upon the previous one, forming a journey from questioning the world to questioning the one who believes they are separate from it. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for listening. Take a moment to become fully present. Set aside, just for a little while, everything you think you know. And together, let's question everything. I am Kim. I hope you had the opportunity to read or listen to Finding Neve by Joe Bandra. The name Neve, heaven spelled backward, symbolizes a journey of self-discovery, an inward return to the source of true happiness. It is an invitation to look beyond the stories we tell ourselves, rediscover our authentic nature, and awaken to the peace and wholeness that have always been within us.
I want you to just take a second and think about the monologue in your head right now.
Oh yeah, the one that never stops talking.
Exactly. The one you've had running since you woke up this morning. You know the one I mean. That persistent, evaluating voice that kind of acts like the general manager of your existence.
Right, the narrator.
Yeah, the narrator. The voice narrating your struggles, auditing past conversations, or, reminding you to feel that low-grade anxiety about an impending deadline.
Or randomly dragging up a minor social faux pas from like 2018.
Yes, just to keep you on your toes for no reason.
Just for fun.
So I want you to consider what would actually happen if that voice, like the very core of your psychological me, abruptly vanished. Just poof, gone.
I mean, that sounds terrifying to most people.
Right. But imagine life just keeps right on going. The biological machinery operates perfectly, but you are no longer there to stress over it or manage it or claim ownership of it.
It is a terrifying premise because, well, we completely conflate that narrator with our actual existence.
We think that voice is us.
Exactly. We operate under this massive assumption that without the relentless executive control of the ego, our lives would just immediately devolve into absolute chaos.
Like we just sit on the couch and stare at a wall.
Right, till we starved. We treat that internal manager as the literal gravitational force holding the entire architecture of our lives together.
Because we are so conditioned to believe that the friction of managing our identity is what actually generates our survival. But for a man named Joe Bandra, this complete dissolution of the internal manager wasn't just some philosophical thought experiment.
No, it was a very real, sudden event.
Yeah, at 4:18 a.m. on an ordinary Tuesday, that narrator vanished permanently. And the resulting shift didn't lead to catatonia or chaos.
Far from it.
It led to an entirely different baseline of human functioning. So today, the mission of this deep dive is to tear apart the mechanics of what actually happens when the illusion of a separate self completely collapses.
Yeah, and we have some incredible source material for this.
We do. These excerpts are from the upcoming book, The Nature of Reality by Joe Bandra. And what really fascinates me about this account is how fiercely it strips away the incense, the chanting, the mystical aesthetics.
Right, the stuff we usually associate with this topic.
Exactly. We aren't looking at someone retreating to a monastery to escape the world. We are analyzing the functional, neurological, and psychological implications of this state on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Like when the internet router suddenly breaks.
Yes. Or you're dealing with annoying colleagues or washing dishes.
Which honestly is the only arena where this actually matters.
Say more about that.
Well, I mean, if a philosophical or cognitive shift of this magnitude doesn't hold up under the pressure of a flooded basement or a broken router, it's basically entirely useless.
It's just intellectual escapism.
Exactly. What we are examining today is the structural reorganization of a human being's reality. It's a shift from navigating the world as a fragmented, isolated entity fighting for survival to functioning as a localized expression of a unified whole.
Okay, so let's get right into the anatomy of that shift. Because Bandra pinpoints the exact minute his old baseline disappeared.
April 15th, 2020.
Yep, at 4:18 a.m. But here is the piece I find just, well, the most disruptive to our usual understanding of mindfulness and cognitive development.
The fact that it wasn't earned.
Exactly. We are completely immersed in a culture of transactional self-improvement. We're constantly told that if we put in our 10,000 hours of meditation or read enough Stoic philosophy, we'll get there.
If we just process enough trauma, we'll eventually cross this finish line into lasting peace.
Right. But Bandra is emphatic that this event bypassed all of that. It wasn't an achievement. It arrived completely uninvited and happened instantaneously.
And that makes total sense when you break it down because that transactional mindset is fundamentally flawed.
How so?
Well, it relies on the very mechanism it's trying to dismantle. Think about it. If I am meditating for thousands of hours to become enlightened, the I is still the primary operator.
Oh, I see. The ego is still running the show.
Right. It's the ego attempting to acquire its own absence, which is a structural possibility.
It's like a flashlight trying to shine light on itself.
Or trying to bite your own teeth.
Yeah.
What happened at 4:18 a.m. wasn't the culmination of some effortful climb. The mechanism of the seeker simply dropped offline.
Wow. Okay.
And we see this across various accounts of sudden unitive experiences. They don't happen because the brain finally solved a complex puzzle. They happen because the network responsible for generating the illusion of the puzzle just collapses.
But, describing that collapse brings up a really immediate structural problem.
Language.
Language, yeah. How do you communicate an experience that fundamentally lacks an observer?
It's incredibly difficult.
Because we're all highly familiar with how our language is constructed, right? Subject, verb, object, the observer acts upon the observed.
English, and honestly virtually all human language, is entirely dualistic.
Yeah, so the moment you try to articulate a unified state of reality, a state where the division between the experiencer and the experience doesn't even exist, the very syntax of your sentence falsifies the event.
This is a massive linguistic hurdle. I mean, language evolved to help primates navigate physical space, manipulate tools, organize social hierarchies.
It's meant for survival.
Exactly. It's a slicing mechanism. It takes a unified field of reality and chops it up into discrete, manageable concepts. Tree, rock, you.
Me.
So the moment you use a noun, you create a boundary that doesn't actually exist in physics, right?
Right.
So when an individual transitions into a state where those conceptual boundaries are no longer perceived as absolute reality, language becomes incredibly clumsy.
It's just the wrong tool for the job.
Right. Any sentence attempting to describe a non-dual reality is already inherently compromised by its dualistic structure. It can point toward the truth, but it can never contain it.
Let me try to ground that in a physical analogy because I think it helps.
Go for it.
So imagine a three-dimensional object, like a solid sphere, interacting with a purely two-dimensional universe.
Like a flat piece of paper.
Exactly, a flat piece of paper. If you are a 2D entity living on that paper, your entire perceptual apparatus is limited to length and width.
You have no concept of up or down.
Right. So if that 3D sphere passes through your 2D plane, you aren't going to perceive a sphere. You're going to see a tiny dot appear out of nowhere.
And then it would rapidly expand into a large, flat circle as the widest part of the sphere moves through.
Yes, and then it would shrink back down into a dot before vanishing completely. So if you tried to describe the sphere using your 2D vocabulary, you would confidently define it as a changing circle.
Which isn't a lie, based on your perception.
Right, you wouldn't be lying, but you would be profoundly missing the actual nature of the object. So our dualistic language is that 2D paper.
That beautifully illustrates the translation problem. And it also explains why so many accounts of profound cognitive shifts sound either vaguely poetic or, well, deeply frustrating to the analytical mind.
They just sound like riddles.
Exactly. But what's equally important here is analyzing what didn't occur.
Oh, this is fascinating, yeah.
Because the cultural expectation of an awakening usually involves, visions of sacred geometry or auditory hallucinations of divine choirs.
Like some cosmic television channel broadcasting the secrets of the universe.
Right. But for Bandra, none of that happened. The physical environment remained completely unaltered. The wall was still the wall. The clock was still the clock.
So perception itself is what fundamentally changed, not the objects being perceived.
Exactly.
Okay, but hold on. I struggle with this framing a bit. Let me push back.
Sure.
If the narrator or the internal manager completely dissolves at 4:08 a.m. and the boundary between subject and object is gone, who is actually recording this data?
The memory question.
Yeah. If the cognitive filer goes offline, how does a memory of this event even form? How do you write a book about an experience if the you that supposedly had the experience was completely absent?
It's a critical paradox, and it comes down to how memory functions in relation to the default mode network.
The brain's narrative center.
Right. Let's look at a specific metaphor to unpack this.
Yeah.
This is the tinted window concept. So imagine you have spent your entire biological life looking out at the world through a heavily tinted window.
Okay.
But because you were born with this tint, you have absolutely no idea it exists. You simply assume the world itself is inherently dim, slightly muted, and fundamentally separate from you.
You just think that's what reality looks like.
Exactly. Then, in an instant, the tint vanishes. The physical world outside the window hasn't changed its atomic structure at all.
The trees are still the same trees.
Right. But the filtering mechanism has disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So the memory that gets encoded into the brain's hippocampus isn't a memory of a new external world.
It's a memory of the tint disappearing.
Yes. It's the profound, unmistakable memory of the absence of the tint.
The absence of the tint. Okay, so the brain's recording apparatus, the physical neurology, is still completely functional. But it's no longer capturing data through that heavy, distorting filter of the egoic self. It's recording raw, unfiltered reality.
Exactly. The cognitive ability to perceive spatial dimensions or sequential time doesn't break down. What vanishes is the psychological feeling of being a separate center.
That feeling of being localized somewhere behind the eyes.
Right, standing in opposition to the rest of the universe. That feeling of separation is an energetic filter. And we really don't realize how much computational power the brain spends constantly constructing and defending that boundary between me and not me.
It sounds exhausting when you put it like that.
It is. So when that specific processing requirement drops away, it leaves a void. But it's not a scary, empty void. It's a remarkably lucid one.
And I think we've all tasted microdoses of this, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like anyone who is engaged deeply in a state of flow, whether it's high-level athletics, complex coding, playing an instrument.
Or just being profoundly absorbed in a breathtaking landscape.
Yeah, exactly. In those hyper-focused states, the prefrontal cortex temporarily downregulates. The internal critic evaluating your performance just shuts up.
You aren't you running down the trail or painting the canvas.
Right. There is just the raw action of running or painting occurring in space. But the difference is, when we snap out of those flow states, the manager immediately rushes back into the control room to claim credit.
It pops up and says, wow, I did a great job just then.
Exactly.
And if that manager doesn't rush back in, standard psychological models suggest we should experience a psychotic break or sheer terror.
Like depersonalization.
Derealization, yeah.
Yeah.
Because if the controller of the experience vanishes, the ego assumes the organism is in mortal danger. Yet in these genuine unitive shifts, the psychological response is the exact opposite of terror.
Which moves us directly into the actual anatomy of this missing self. When the manager goes on permanent vacation, what actually replaces it?
Well, Bandra outlines 3 distinct characteristics that flood the system.
Uncaused peace, omnipresent love, and the cessation of psychological time.
Let's dissect the peace first, because we need to differentiate this from what we typically categorize as feeling peaceful.
Right, because normally if I finally pay off a stressful debt or resolve a conflict with a friend, I feel peace.
But that's conditional.
Yeah, it's the cessation of a specific tension.
What you're describing is the peace of relief. Relief requires a prior state of agitation. It requires a problem to be solved.
Okay, so how is this different?
The peace that emerges when the narrative self collapses is uncaused. It is completely independent of external conditions. It exists entirely prior to circumstances.
So it's not dependent on things going well.
Not at all. Ordinarily, our baseline peace is highly conditional. We feel okay if our health is stable, if our relationships are secure, if our social status is affirmed.
There are a lot of ifs.
Too many.
Yeah.
The peace described in this shift operates underneath all those variables. It's the realization that the foundational nature of consciousness is inherently undisturbed, regardless of the chaotic weather patterns happening on the surface of life.
It's like the depths of the ocean.
That's a great way to put it.
I mean, there could be a Category 5 hurricane tearing the surface of the water apart, tossing ships around, but if you drop down 2,000 feet, the water is perfectly still.
And the stillness doesn't have to be manufactured. It's just the default state of the depth.
Wow. And in this state, spiritual rhetoric that usually sounds like, vague poetry, suddenly takes on the clarity of a physics equation.
Yes.
Like when historical texts say things like, the kingdom of heaven is within, it's no longer this distant theological promise. It functions as a stark, literal observation of human neurobiology.
It becomes an observational fact. And intrinsically linked to this deep water piece is a total absence of fear.
Which is wild.
Now, we must be precise here. We are not talking about courage.
Because courage implies fear is still there.
Exactly. Courage is the ego's mechanism for overriding fear. It implies that fear is present, but you are bravely acting in spite of it. In this state, fear fundamentally cannot exist.
Why not?
Because fear structurally requires a subject and an object. It requires a fragmented reality.
Right, because for me to be afraid, there has to be a vulnerable me localized over here and a threatening other localized over there.
Exactly. If the illusion of that boundary collapses, fear loses its foundational architecture. There's no separate self to defend.
No isolated avatar that can be destroyed.
Right. When the underlying reality is perceived as an unbroken continuum, the psychological terror of annihilation vanishes.
Now, obviously, the biological reflex to pull your hand away from a hot stove remains.
Of course, that's just cellular intelligence, but the psychological dread of the future, that existential anxiety that just hums in the background of modern life, that is completely eradicated.
And this actually brings up a major insight from Joe Bandra regarding how this state redefines human emotion, particularly love.
This is a huge paradigm shift.
Yeah, because when we use the word love, we are almost always talking about a targeted transactional energy. But Bandra points out that this state reveals a love that is omnipresent, lacking any opposite, condition, or limitation.
Think about our standard biological and psychological conception of love. It's highly directional. It's driven by evolutionary attachment.
I love my partner, I love my kids, I love my dog.
Right. It has a specific object, a distinct trajectory, and a required set of conditions. It is deeply personal.
And conditional.
Highly conditional. If the object of my love changes their behavior in a way I don't like, my love might turn into resentment or apathy.
Right, it can flip.
But the love that emerges in the absence of the ego isn't an emotion generated by the brain in response to a stimulus. It is recognized as the underlying fabric of existence itself. It has absolutely no target.
It fundamentally changes the physics of the emotion. So think of ordinary directed love like a laser beam.
Okay, a laser beam.
You take this intense, concentrated energy and you point it directly at a specific person. It's incredibly powerful, but it's highly localized.
Right.
And if that person moves out of the way or if they change in a way you don't like, the laser beam either misses them or you actively shut it off.
Because they didn't meet the conditions?
Exactly. But this unitive, impersonal love is like a space heater placed in the corner of a room.
Oh, I like this.
The space heater has no agenda. It doesn't evaluate who walks into the room before deciding to emit heat.
It just radiates.
It warms the sleeping dog, the CEO, the criminal, the furniture. It warms everything equally. Not because of the moral quality of the objects in the room, but simply because it is the fundamental nature of the heater to radiate warmth.
The space heater analogy is brilliant because it removes the burden of doing love. In this awakened state, love isn't an action you perform. It's the environment you inhabit.
You just are it.
And because it requires no effort, it doesn't drain the system. It's inexhaustible. And within this environment of unconditional radiation, we encounter perhaps the most profound psychological shift of all.
It is.
The complete cessation of the psychological movement toward becoming.
Okay, let's stop and unpack this deeply because this cuts directly against the grain of our entire modern operating system.
It really does.
No psychological movement toward becoming? If you look at the architecture of our culture, we are utterly exhausted by the demand to become.
We are trapped on a treadmill of perpetual self-optimization.
Always. We need to become more productive, more mindful, more physically fit, more wealthy, more spiritually evolved.
The brain is constantly running simulations of a future state where we will finally achieve completion.
So what happens when that mechanism fundamentally shuts down?
To understand this, we really have to look at the brain as a predictive processing machine.
Okay.
Neuroscientists argue that the brain is essentially an inference engine. It is constantly projecting past data into the future to predict what is going to happen next, all to minimize surprise and keep the organism safe.
So it's always leaning forward.
That constant, relentless forward projection is what we experience psychologically as becoming. We are never actually here. We are always mentally leaning into the next microsecond, the next hour, the next 5-year plan.
So when the narrative self collapses, that specific predictive machinery just stops.
The predictive machinery governing psychological identity goes offline. The friction stops.
So it's not that you lose the executive function to plan what you're having for dinner or to schedule a dentist appointment.
No, you can still function practically.
You just stop using the future as a repository for your self-worth. You stop believing that the you arriving at dinner tonight is going to be fundamentally more complete than the you existing right now.
Precisely. The search comes to a grinding, absolute halt because there is no seeker left to look for a destination.
That sounds so incredibly liberating.
It is. In this state, reality is perceived with such intense immediacy that nothing seems absent. Everything fits perfectly into the present moment, and absolutely nothing requires correction.
Which leads us directly into the subjective experience of timelessness.
Right.
Because if you strip away the brain's constant oscillation between regretting the past and anticipating the future, what is actually left?
Just now.
Yeah. And the text is careful to note that operational time didn't evaporate. The clock on the wall still ticked forward. The sun still moved across the sky. The physical world continued to decay and regenerate.
Right. Physics still applies.
But psychological time, the heavy, burdensome mental time travel that consumes 90% of our waking hours, completely ceased.
Time, as a psychological burden, is entirely constructed by thought. It's literally the measurement of the distance between where you are and where you want to be.
Oh, wow.
So when the desire to be somewhere else vanishes, psychological time collapses right along with it.
You're just here.
You are left with what various mystical and philosophical traditions have spent centuries trying to articulate: the eternal now, nirvana, the timeless presence.
And these aren't mystical destinations.
No, they are highly accurate descriptions of a neurobiological state where top-down predictive processing has surrendered entirely to bottom-up sensory immediacy.
Okay, so we've painted a picture of this incredibly intense, almost unimaginable state. Total uncaused peace, objectless love radiating like a space heater, the complete collapse of time and fear.
It's maximal intensity.
But we need to introduce a heavy dose of reality here, because the acute phase of this 4.18 a.m. experience did not last forever in its maximal intensity.
No, it didn't.
We have to examine the aftermath. What happens when the tinted window comes back? Because if this was just a fleeting 30-day neurological high, it's just an interesting anecdote. But Bandra argues this was a permanent restructuring of reality.
And according to the timeline, this intense, undiluted condition remained unmistakably present for about 30 days.
A whole month.
Yeah. During that month, biological life continued. He ate, he slept, he walked around, but all of it was permeated by an overwhelming, undeniable well-being.
But the human brain is an organ of homeostasis, right?
Exactly. It cannot sustain a peak state indefinitely without exhausting its metabolic resources. Eventually, the intensity subsidized. The ordinary sense of individuality, the localized human personality began to boot back up.
Preferences returned.
Opinions returned.
The humanity reclaimed its territory, which, to be perfectly honest, I find deeply comforting.
It grounds the whole thing.
It really does. But let me play the aggressive skeptic here for a second.
Please do.
If someone experiences this profound collapse of the ego, they touch absolute non-dual reality, and then 30 days later, they are back to getting genuinely irritated because they're stuck in traffic behind a guy who refuses to use his turn signal. Didn't they lose it?
You're saying they fell out of enlightenment.
Yeah, doesn't the return of the egoic frustration mean the whole awakening was just a transient glitch in the brain chemistry?
It's the most common trap seekers fall into. The belief that enlightenment means the permanent eradication of the human personality.
Okay.
But the distinction is subtle and profound.
Break it down for me.
While the blinding intensity of the experience faded and the localized personality returned to handle daily operations, a permanent certainty remained.
Certainty.
And we use the word certainty deliberately. It is not a belief. It is not a philosophy adopted after rigorous logical debate. It is a known fact.
What is the fact?
The certainty is that reality is fundamentally far greater, more intimate, and more loving than the separate self can ever comprehend.
The phrase that really stands out to me from the material is, the absence of a reference point had paradoxically become the new reference point.
That's a great line. Let's dissect that.
Yeah. So before the 4.1 a.m. event, the reference point for evaluating reality was the manager.
Right.
Every piece of data was filtered through the question, how does this affect me? Does this threaten my status, my wealth, my image?
Everything was self-referential.
But after the event, the manager comes back from its 30-day vacation and immediately starts trying to organize the desk again. It gets annoyed in traffic, it prefers coffee over tea, but the underlying consciousness now knows that the manager is just a localized tool, not the center of the universe.
The tinted window has returned, yes, but now you know with absolute empirical certainty that you are looking through a tinted window.
You can't unsee it.
You can never again be fully hypnotized into believing that the tint is the actual objective color of reality.
Yeah.
You can experience the annoyance of traffic without suffering from the existential weight of it.
So the ego is basically demoted.
The ego is demoted from the CEO of reality to a mid-level operational manager.
Which sets up another major insight from Joe Bandra. When a person undergoes this shift, the immediate assumption from the outside is that they will become a guru.
That they'll start a following.
Right. But Bandra is explicitly clear. The purpose of experiencing this certainty, and certainly the purpose of documenting it in a book, is not to demand belief from anyone else. Cultivating blind belief is entirely missing the point.
Belief is actually a barrier to this state, because belief requires an ego to cling to a concept. The objective isn't to create followers who treat a 4.1 a.m. awakening as dogma.
What is the objective then?
To encourage relentless, deep personal investigation, inquiry, discovery. If we pull the lens back and look across the entire spectrum of human intellectual pursuit, whether it's quantum physics, advanced mathematics, contemplative psychology, or non-dual philosophy, we see brilliant minds repeatedly hitting the bedrock of this unified reality.
It's like all of human inquiry is a massive excavation project on a single mountain.
I love that image.
Yeah, think about it. The physicists are digging from the east with particle accelerators, discovering that at the subatomic level, local realism breaks down and everything is deeply entangled. The philosophers are digging from the west, using logic and phenomenology. The meditators are digging from the south through deep introspection.
And occasionally a guy like Bandra is just sleeping at 4.18 a.m., and the side of the mountain spontaneously collapses on its own.
Exactly. The paths are wildly divergent. Some people arrive through intense, unimaginable suffering that shatters the ego. Some arrive through decades of Zen practice. But the mystery they uncover in the center of the mountain is identical.
The convergence of these disciplines is what makes this so compelling. And realizing that this mystery is accessible through multiple avenues shatters one of the most pervasive and damaging misconceptions in the entire field of personal development and spirituality.
Oh, we have to tear this down. The spiritual superhero myth.
We really do.
Because if we have already established that human irritation, opinions, and basic biological needs return after the acute phase of an awakening, we have to actively dismantle the cartoonish illusion most seekers project onto the concept of enlightenment.
We all carry this secret, deeply conditioned image of what a truly awakened person is supposed to look and act like.
We project this archetype of the flawless, stoic monk.
Yes, we imagine someone who operates in a state of perpetual, unblinking bliss.
Like they float a few inches off the pavement.
They never get angry, their voice never raises above a gentle whisper, they never accidentally burn their toast.
And they definitely never get frustrated by a software update.
Exactly. Every sentence they speak is perfectly calibrated, scripture-ready wisdom.
It's a complete sanitization of the human experience.
And the reality is so aggressively mundane, it's almost comical.
The reality of an awakened life still involves paying property taxes.
It involves a sink full of dirty dishes.
It involves a dog that will not stop barking at the mailman. It involves your internet router completely dying 5 minutes before you have to give a crucial presentation on Zoom.
Awakening doesn't magically repair the router. The friction of the material world remains entirely intact.
And this is where so many people abandon the pursuit.
Oh, absolutely.
Because unconsciously, they're using spirituality as a sophisticated escape hatch. They want mindfulness to be a tool that bypasses the grit, the boredom, and the friction of ordinary existence.
They want an anesthetic. But the great contemplative traditions and the neurological reality of this state point in the exact opposite direction.
Toward participation.
Yes. Awakening is not withdrawal into a protected bubble. It is unflinching, radically open participation with what is happening right now. It is about being entirely, inescapably present for the broken router.
It's funny, we spend our entire lives, and frankly ridiculous amounts of money, flying to remote ashrams in India or sitting on silent mountaintops, convinced that the ultimate truth of the universe is hiding somewhere exotic.
Somewhere far away.
And then when the illusion collapses, you realize that reality was just sitting quietly in your own kitchen while you were making coffee, patiently waiting for you to stop looking past it.
The human ego is obsessed with the drama of massive transformation, but fundamental reality is staggering in its simplicity.
And that pivot from seeking dramatic, exotic experiences to embracing the profound simplicity of the mundane is captured in another major insight from Joe Bandra.
It completely alters the trajectory of how a human life is lived.
Yeah, he observes that prior to this shift, life fundamentally operates under the metaphor of a ladder.
The ladder of teleology. Everything has a destination. In our default state, life is a vertical climb.
There is always another rung to grasp. You need to get the degree, to get the job, to get the promotion, to get the bigger house.
To reach the next milestone of spiritual awareness.
But the cruel trick of the ladder is that the horizon of satisfaction recedes the exact moment you reach it.
Always.
The second your hand touches the rung you've spent 5 years aiming for, your brain instantly recalibrates and looks up at the next one. You are perpetually arriving, but never actually present.
It's an exhaustion machine.
Yeah.
But when the narrative itself collapses, the entire paradigm of the ladder evaporates. Life stops functioning as a vertical climb toward a future completion and begins to operate like music.
Oh, I love the music metaphor.
The entire philosophical purpose of music is radically different from the purpose of a ladder. If you treat a symphony like a ladder, the goal would be to reach the final note as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Right. If that were true, the greatest piece of music in the world would just be one deafeningly loud crash of a cymbal, and then it would be over.
We just speedrun Beethoven.
Yes. But the joy, the entire reason music exists, is the playing itself, the expression, the unfolding of the notes in real time.
You don't dance to reach a specific spot on the floor.
You dance to be dancing. It really reminds me of the core principle in Taoist philosophy regarding the concept of the natural.
Yes, the text draws a direct parallel to Taoism here. The highest state of human wisdom isn't about acquiring supernatural abilities or becoming some highly optimized, special version of yourself.
It's about returning to a state of profound naturalness.
It's living in frictionless harmony with reality, in the exact same way a tree grows or a river flows downhill.
Because a tree doesn't suffer from imposter syndrome about being a tree.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't stress about whether its branches are growing fast enough compared to the tree next to it. It simply expresses its nature.
Exactly.
So if you're listening to this, I want you to run a quick diagnostic on your own operating system right now. Look at the next 24 hours of your life. Are you treating today as a problem that needs to be solved?
Is it just a series of obstacles you have to conquer?
Yeah. Are you aggressively managing it so you can hopefully get to a slightly more relaxing tomorrow? Or are you treating today like an ongoing, dynamic conversation that you are invited to participate in?
Are you exhausted from climbing the ladder, or are you willing to just play the music?
It is a radical reorientation of energy. And if we accept that life is no longer a ladder, we have to subject this philosophy to the ultimate stress test.
The real-world application.
Exactly. We have to look at how this shift alters our engagement with the 3 arenas of human life that demand the most climbing.
Our relationships, our careers, and aging.
This is where the abstract philosophy gets intensely, sometimes uncomfortably practical. So let's start with relationships, because this is where the ego usually does its most damaging work.
No doubt about that.
Before this awakening, relationships are almost entirely driven by unconscious transactions. We don't do it maliciously, but we are driven by a deep, unexamined feeling of lack.
We feel incomplete.
Fragmented, insecure. So we go out into the dating market or our social circles, and we try to find another human being to plug the hole in our psyche.
We essentially hire our partners for an impossible job. We hand them a contract that says, your assignment is to make me permanently happy and perfectly secure.
Which is a catastrophic setup for mutual resentment. Humanity has been running this exact relational playbook for thousands of years, and it fails every single time.
Because you are demanding that a flawed, changing, heavily burdened human being act as your personal savior.
So what happens when that feeling of lack dissolves?
When the separate self that demands completion vanishes, the architecture of the relationship completely transforms. The love doesn't disappear, but the desperate, clinging dependency evaporates.
It shifts from possession to pure appreciation. The other person is instantly fired from the impossible job of completing you.
They are no longer a tool you use to regulate your own anxiety.
They're simply a fellow traveler. You can actually see them clearly for the first time because you aren't staring at them through the distorted lens of your own unmet needs.
They stop being a supporting actor forced to hit their marks in your personal drama.
And they become a sovereign being you simply get to share space with.
And when you stop viewing other people through the lens of what they can do for you, it triggers a major insight from Joe Bandra regarding the nature of compassion.
Oh, this is a profound one.
In our standard cultural operating system, compassion is treated as a moral duty. It's a heavy ethical obligation. We have to force ourselves to be compassionate to people who irritate us, which takes immense willpower.
But in an awakened view, compassion isn't a moral flex.
No, compassion is simply clarity.
I want to highlight that. Compassion isn't morality, it's clarity. What does that actually look like in practice?
When you interact with someone who is acting out of deep fear, someone who's lashing out in anger, or someone completely trapped in toxic resentment, the ordinary egoic reaction is immediate defense.
We judge them, we condemn them, and we fortify our own walls against them.
But when the illusion of separation collapses, you see the mechanics of human behavior with devastating clarity.
Yeah.
You realize a fundamental truth. People do not create suffering because they are happy.
People create suffering because they're suffering.
Exactly.
It fundamentally rewires your reaction. Doesn't mean you tolerate abuse or excuse destructive behavior. Boundaries still exist, but it completely removes the rigid, self-righteous judgment.
You look past the obnoxious, aggressive behavior, and you see the terrified, confused ego underneath it that is desperately trying to protect itself.
You don't hate them. You recognize the shared human predicament.
And just as our relationships transition from transaction to pure appreciation, our relationship with our career and our ambition undergoes a similar structural revolution.
Because in the modern world, we define ourselves almost exclusively by our economic output.
Our career is our identity.
If the business succeeds, I am a success. If the project fails, I am a failure. We fuse our sense of existential worth to volatile external metrics.
This is exactly why so many highly successful people face catastrophic mental health crises when they retire.
Because if I am what I do, who the hell am I when I stop doing it?
The awakening process acts as a solvent that unglues your identity from your outflow. The work itself doesn't have to stop. You can still be incredibly creative, driven, and effective.
But your core identity is no longer held hostage by the results.
Right. You can experience a massive financial windfall or a humiliating public failure. And while the human avatar processes the joy or the disappointment, the underlying awareness knows that it didn't become the success or the failure.
It reminds me of the actor Daniel Day-Lewis.
Okay, how so?
Well, he is legendary for his intense method acting. He will inhabit a role so completely that he insists on being addressed as Abraham Lincoln or Bill the Butcher for months on end. He gives 100% of his life force to the performance.
Right. Total dedication.
But the moment the director finally yells, "cut," on the last day of production, he doesn't go home to his family believing he is actually a 19th century president. He takes off the top hat, he drops the character.
It's a flawless analogy for navigating the material world post-awakening. Life becomes immeasurably lighter when you master the skill of playing your required human roles, the parent, the employee, the citizen with absolute dedication and love, but retain the underlying knowledge that it is a costume.
You can put the briefcase down.
You can drop the incredibly heavy suitcase for your carefully curated self-image. The exhaustion we feel at the end of the day isn't usually from the physical work we did.
It's from the massive amount of cognitive energy required to constantly defend and project our egoic identity into the world.
Which naturally brings us to the final and perhaps most difficult practical application.
The reality of the decaying physical body, aging.
The mirror is a brutally honest piece of glass.
It really is. The skin sags, the joints ache, the strength fades. The youth we spent decades cultivating inevitably disappears.
And if your entire identity is exclusively anchored to your physical avatar, if you believe you are your body, then the process of aging is nothing but a tragic, terrifying story of irreversible loss.
It becomes a slow-motion existential crisis.
When the locus of identity shifts from the localized body to the boundless awareness experiencing the body, the context of aging transforms entirely.
The physical decline doesn't stop, but it ceases to be an attack on your fundamental self.
Now, it's crucial to remain grounded here. Bandra's work doesn't suggest that awakening turns you into an unfeeling cyborg.
It doesn't bypass human grief or the sadness of watching your physical capabilities diminish.
It simply changes the container in which those emotions are held.
Right. It doesn't make you less human. And honestly, I think the greatest paradox of this entire deep dive is that the complete dissolution of the ego doesn't turn you into a detached alien.
It makes you infinitely more human.
It makes you radically authentic. You become intimately connected with the raw texture of your own life. You can laugh louder, you can cry more openly, and you can forgive much faster.
Not because you have ascended to become some flawless, crystalline being of pure light.
But because the massive fortress of psychological defenses you spent your whole life building has been dismantled. All that energy is finally freed up for actual, unfiltered living.
This is exactly why individuals who have undergone genuine unitive shifts often appear remarkably, almost disappointingly, ordinary to the outside world.
They don't speak in riddles.
They still drink their coffee black, they still forget where they park their car, they still tell terrible dad jokes.
And they still navigate the messy, unpredictable chaos of being alive.
They haven't found an escape hatch from reality. They have simply realized that true spirituality isn't a desperate hunt for the extraordinary. It's the quiet, staggering discovery that the sacred has been hiding in plain sight, right inside the ordinary.
Right here, right now, in the exact center of everyday life.
Beautifully said.
Okay, let's pull all these threads together. We started with a jarring thought experiment that became a reality for Joe Bandra at 4:18 a.m., a spontaneous, unearned collapse of the internal manager and the illusion of a fragmented self.
We dug into the neurology and psychology of how that absence of a filter results in uncaused peace.
A non-directional love that radiates like a space heater.
And the complete shutdown of the brain's exhausting predictive time travel.
We dismantled the cartoonish myth of the spiritual superhero who never gets annoyed, and instead found a deeply grounded, functional philosophy that shifts life from a grueling climb up a ladder into the effortless playing of music.
And ultimately, we arrived at the profound punchline. That absolute reality doesn't require you to flee to a cave.
It is waiting for you in the incredibly mundane act of washing your dishes.
And as a reminder, the framework and the profound insights we've unpacked today are drawn from the upcoming book, The Nature of Reality by Joe Bandra. It provides a phenomenal, highly practical blueprint for recognizing the infinite within the seemingly mundane boundaries of our daily routines.
I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought to chew on as you transition back into the noise of your day.
Let's hear it.
We've spent the last hour dissecting how utterly exhausting it is to manage your identity. The sheer caloric output required to defend your ego, project your status, and try to strong-arm your circumstances into making you feel safe is staggering.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is. So if the you that you have been so fiercely, anxiously protecting all these years is, at its core, a neurological illusion.
And if reality actually functions beautifully, perhaps even better, without that internal manager frantically pulling all the levers.
What would happen if you intentionally submitted your resignation? What if you officially quit the job of managing the universe for just 5 minutes today? Just 5 minutes. Put the clipboard down. Stop projecting. Stop defending. What if you just let the music of your life play for one brief moment without desperately trying to conduct it?
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Joe Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Joe bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Nevaeh, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Joe's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Nevaeh's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for, until she met Joe Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward, navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by finding Nevaeh.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Nevaeh, available on Amazon and at findingnevaeh.org, or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.